I teach at Box Hill College in Kuwait, a business instructor. So a few questions before we start the presentation. Who's interested in entrepreneurship? Please raise your hand. Okay, we have a good crowd. Who's interested in institutional economics? Okay, very good. Thank you. Today's topic, we are going to talk about towards a theoretical framework between opportunity entrepreneurship, institutions, and economic development. Maybe for those who are not an expert in this field, maybe they would say it's a little bit complicated. However, the aim of this presentation is to elaborate and explain about this relationship. In the beginning, I'm going to give an introduction about this relationship. I give a background about it. Later on, I will talk about the need for entrepreneurial environment in the context of oil-based economies. And later on, I will propose a conceptual framework that would help entrepreneurs to be more productive. As we all know, oil-based economies, especially oil-based countries, such as GCC, they face important challenges, especially after the economic crisis and the decrease of oil prices. Different strategies have been made in the past 20 years, such as trying to have stable inflation, such as focusing on education, or trying to have foreign direct investments. However, none of these strategies have managed to keep a sustainable development. Maybe few countries, however, most of oil-based economies couldn't do that. So, entrepreneurship came up as a solution, or one of the important solutions for this matter. Before I start this relationship, it's important to explain two assumptions about this relationship. The first assumption, that institutions are meant to motivate people to be more productive. The second assumption is that knowledge is not directly has an impact on economic growth, in a sense that knowledge should go through different mechanisms in order to contribute to economic growth. One of these important mechanisms is entrepreneurship. But how is that so? Maybe you will ask me this question. Before I answer your question, some studies show a negative relationship between entrepreneurship and economic growth. That's because they take the definition of entrepreneurship from self-employment concept. And if we want to consider self-employment, we see there are higher rates in developing countries more than developed countries. But entrepreneurship is not about number of entrepreneurs. It's about the quality of entrepreneurs. How can entrepreneurship or entrepreneurs be more productive? Because most entrepreneurs that we see in developing countries are selling basic goods and products. You can see them in the corners of streets, such as fruits, vegetables, and so on. So what kind of entrepreneurship should we focus on in order to contribute significantly to economic growth? What we really are looking for, and this is a really important sentence, we are looking for innovative entrepreneurs who are motivated by business opportunities in the market. And they can bring the benefit of a new knowledge to economic growth through new products and services. This type of entrepreneurs, I'm going to repeat this sentence, because if we agree on the definition, we can agree on the other things for the implication of this concept. We are focusing on innovative entrepreneurs who are motivated by the business opportunities in the market, and they can bring the benefit of a new knowledge by offering new products and services. And I believe this is the core concept of knowledge economy. So maybe a good example about this is Apple and other technological companies, Amazon, Google, and so on. Apple, they managed in the past 20 years to increase their brand value from 60 billion to 600 billion. That's not a bad number. Sometimes it's bigger than GDP of other countries, of some developing countries. Economists, they consider, unfortunately, many economists, they did not consider entrepreneurship in their equations and in their theories. However, some economists, they consider entrepreneurship as a gap filler or input completer to the economy. So if we have an example, if we consider economic growth as a wall and it has some gaps in it, and there are some bricks that we need to fill in, those entrepreneurs are the ones who can do that. In other words, entrepreneurs, they combine different productive resources such as human capital, physical capital, technology change. They combine them together in order to add a value to the market. As a result, there is an increased buy of the economy through export and through adding value to the market. But someone will ask me a question. For example, what are you talking about? This is Steve Jobs. He was born in America, land of opportunities. We don't have this in other developing countries. And this is the aim of our study. The aim of our study is to develop an entrepreneurial environment that would encourage opportunity entrepreneurs to be more productive in the context of oil-based economies in order to have a sustainable and diversify the economy. What do you mean by entrepreneurial environment? Well, basically, it's about a combination of factors that would increase the productivity of entrepreneurs. These factors usually are coming through institutions. And here we classified institutions into formal and informal institutions. This classification is really important because the impact of formal institutions are really different from informal. What I mean by formal institutions, I mean laws and regulations that are imposed by government. And the purpose of formal institutions is to decrease the transaction cost and motivate entrepreneurs to be more productive. The other concept, informal institutions, we are talking about culture, social norms, and values. How is the country appreciate entrepreneurship and entrepreneurs, and how they can perceive about new innovations? And the purpose of informal institutions is to reduce the uncertainty between human interaction. So, unfortunately, most of the studies, they treat this distinction as a separation between them. However, in reality, we see there is an interaction. This interaction is a gap in many studies and in the literature. So what we meant, the main contribution that we tried to make by proposing this theoretical framework is to show some of these interactions between formal and informal institutions. To give you a simple example, as you can see from this picture, traffic laws. Ask yourself a question. Most of traffic laws worldwide are standard, except UK, maybe I guess, and maybe other some countries. I don't know why, but maybe you can tell me later. Most of traffic laws are standard. However, the number of accidents in different countries there is a huge divergence and variation. And that's due to the discipline of the community. And that's due to the self-commitment from people to follow rules and regulation. Same analogy we can apply to the relationship between entrepreneurs, the formal regulations. Some entrepreneurs in different contexts may not accept it or may not be self-committed to it. And by proposing this framework, we are going to show that there are key institutions that are going to affect opportunity entrepreneurship in a direct way.
Time, Hassan.
Sorry? Yes, formal institutions. We followed a framework by Genuani Al-Fojl in 1994. And this framework, formal institutions are classified into 4 dimensions. Government policies and procedures, number 1. Number 2, entrepreneurial skills and education. And we have financial and non-financial assistance. From the other side, informal institutions, we are going to offer some other dimensions. The main key institutions under the dimension of government policies and procedures, and I'm going to talk about them due to that time lag. I will just mention them, the main key institutions, and maybe you can go back to my paper and read more about it. Property rights, ownership, intellectual property, we all know that is really important. Business freedom, labor freedom, the freedom to import good brands, and I believe many of my colleagues have managed to talk about the importance of skillful and scholars, skillful people or entrepreneurs. Fiscal freedom, low tax rates, openness to trade, and scale of government activity. And I believe this topic was discussed thoroughly through Dr. John about the scale of government activity. These are the main key institutions that we found. And by the way, all these key institutions, I tried my best to improve them through empirical studies, previous empirical studies, not only theoretically. The second dimension here, we are not focusing only on education. It's really important to focus also on entrepreneurial skills. There is a lack in the system, in the education system, of entrepreneurial skills. Last but not least, we have the access to credit activity. This is really important, especially in developing countries. And this is the role of World Bank, I guess, and United Nations. Government support for research and development, university-industry collaboration, and ICT infrastructure to facilitate knowledge management sharing. These are the key institutions that focus on. However, we want to know about these. I'm going to highlight some of these interactions between formal and informal institutions. Yes. Sorry.
Time is over.
Okay, few minutes, if you don't mind. Last session, they spent for more than an hour, so give me please some time. Informal institutions, here we're focusing on the status of the society. How does the society perceive entrepreneurs and appreciate entrepreneurship? Social networks, how many entrepreneurs do you know in your community? Self-efficacy, and this comes through education and skills. And level of corruption. We have a serious problem in developing countries. This is the main interaction. We found through empirical studies that inefficient government will cause higher level of social networks in order to improve entrepreneurship. So entrepreneurs tend to depend on social networks more than government in order to be more entrepreneurial. A second interaction, we see that lower level of corruption may cause higher level of education, and they spend, for example, Istanbul in 1 year, they saved $6 billion from corruption. And this money can go through research and development.
Thanks, Hassan. Thanks.
1 minute, I will finish.
Hassan.
I will finish 1 minute. Okay, you can go back to my paper and read more about this interaction. The conclusion here, this is the general framework, as you can see it, the interaction, the main key institutions, and how this affect entrepreneurship activity. Conclusion, are you happy? Okay, good. To have the main contribution in this paper, with this theoretical framework, is the interaction to make a distinction between formal and informal institutions, and how do they interact together in order to offer higher entrepreneurial activity. This study is very useful for policymakers, and I wish some of these recommendations can go to government in order to improve and encourage entrepreneurs to be more productive. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
We would like to invite Professor Abdullah Al-Hawaj, Professor Mansour Al-Ali, and Professor Allam Ahmed to please come on stage to reward our speakers. Mr. HASAN GHURA.